So we saw the unveiling of SEGA Ages, and originally I think a lot of people looked at it as, okay, it's going to be a compilation of games maybe, or it's going to be like a cartridge you buy that has 15 games on it. And then we started to learn more and more and more, and it's kind of evolved over the last couple of days from what our initial impression was to it being what appears to be a large brand that is going to be mostly an umbrella or a title over a bunch of games, not just 15 games, not just 15 Genesis games. And that's where things have become very interesting over the last 24 hours, because it seems like the sky is the limit here for SEGA games, up to and possibly including SEGA Saturn and SEGA Dreamcast games for the Nintendo Switch. So the initial talks of Saturn and Dreamcast games coming over to SEGA Ages on the Nintendo Switch was originally from, of course, FES 2018, which was their big convention where we saw all the information about Shenmue 1 and 2, Sakura Wars, the Genesis Mini, all of this stuff. That's kind of where everything here is coming from as well. And different producers and developers of SEGA Ages who also showed off Alex Kidd, which is very interesting to see that come over as well, the Sonic the Hedgehog, Phantasy Star, Thunder Force 4. They went on to talk about the possibility of Genesis, the Genesis or the SEGA Ages Genesis collection they kind of have showing off now, evolving over time into Saturn and Dreamcast games. In fact, they're kind of gauging the success, how well this does, and seeing if they can move to Dreamcast Saturn. But they seem like full speed ahead on board for doing this. Now, there are a couple hurdles, of course, with Saturn and Dreamcast. Dreamcast and Sega Saturn have been weird in the emulation scene, specifically the Sega Saturn. Now, M2 is the developer, the company, really would be writing the emulator, and we assume it would be a full emulator with enhancements, but they could also technically move games over to things like Unity, as we saw with Sega Forever, although the emulation there with Unity was pretty poor, as a lot of people showed with their cell phones. Not the best. Ran very slow, it was very choppy, sluggish, and if you're playing Sonic, that thing needs to be ready. That thing needs to be full speed, or you're not going to have fun with that game. Now, a big write-up was done by Game.Watch. It was in full Japanese, so it was translated, but they pretty much went on to talk about all the different games that we at least know about with SEGA Ages now. They also talk about things like online for different leaderboards and high scores. Who knows if they take it a step further even, and maybe they grab some of the online games like Phantasy Star on the Dreamcast. I'm shooting for the stars there, guys. Let's be realistic. Like a Phantasy Star come over and it has online play on the Switch. We can't even get Phantasy Star Online 2 over here, and I'm talking about the Dreamcast version of it. But there's a lot of things they could do, because it seems like the door's open for things like online play. That would be pretty neat to see some of the Saturn and Dreamcast games do that. But again, emulation is going to be key, because they will need a competent emulator for Saturn games, something we really still don't have. The Sega Saturn was a very odd system. It worked in weird ways, and like the processors were split up. Sometimes the sound processor would be used to help out for different things, and it was a mess in terms of the technical side of developing for that system. The Sony PlayStation was much easier, and honestly, it got the support, and the units moved because of that. But yeah, making an emulator would be kind of tough for that. However, it seems like they've already finished mostly the Genesis emulation, because they were already running it and showing it off and everything, and it seemed to be fine. Now, we need to see if it is successful enough to move Dreamcast and Saturn stuff over. This does, of course, seem to signal no third-party games, I guess, coming to the Virtual Console whenever that is announced, if there is a Virtual Console, as we see with Sega Genesis games and the Neo Geo games kind of being their separate thing. I'm going to be also curious if Sega Ages will be its separate application that you get on the Switch, or if all of these games will just be separate and it'll just have the Sega Ages like branding on it. Maybe it has its own section in the eShop. That would actually be pretty smart to do it that way, have like a Sega Ages section just on the eShop if they do expand past these 15 games. But I do think games like Sonic, just the right old Sonic, things like Alex Kidd, things like Phantasy Star, I think they will sell on the Switch. I mean, look at what's going on with the Neo Geo games that's being done. Those sell actually really well. People buy into those all the time, and it's pretty clear that people do, because they keep introducing new ones. So I would love to see things like Jet Grind Radio. That's what we knew it as here when it came out. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast. I mean, seriously, the list goes on. Power Stone, Crazy Taxi. I'm sure a lot of people in the comments right now are going to list games that they really want on the Switch. And, of course, these games become portable, which is a whole new aspect for Saturn and Dreamcast games. Think about that. Think about that for a minute, having Dreamcast and Sega Saturn games on the go. And honestly, it probably won't stress the system as much as obviously Zelda, so you'll probably get pretty good battery life out of it. You might get 4 to 5, even 6 hours, depending on the game that you're playing and how it's taxing the system. So now you have a very competent, competent port of something like a Sonic Adventure 1 or 2, and you're playing it on the go for a solid 5 hours, whether it's on a plane or maybe you're taking a ride somewhere. That is very, very intriguing, and I would love to see that. But we're going to see how well this launches, SEGA Ages, how well everything sells, and if we can even get to that mark. I hope we do. It sounds like they already had it in mind as they kind of introduced the idea during the panel and said, we would like to do Sega Saturn and Sega Dreamcast games coming over to the Switch. Right now, it seems like Sega Ages is a Switch-only thing, although I don't see any reason why it wouldn't also expand to something like the PC, maybe PS4 and Xbox One, but the PC is probably the next place it would go. Just because if it's successful, why not? They would get more money. The Switch already has its own selling point being portable. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. What are some games you would like to see come over? I mentioned Dreamcast, but Saturn I wasn't as familiar with. I know there are some Saturn games that people really like, but I also know a lot of them were kind of niche, and we didn't have a ton of those become popular here in the States, probably everywhere else, because the Sega Saturn just didn't sell well. But can you imagine having full Saturn games also on the go? I mean, what if they did something like Panzer Dragoon Saga? Would that just completely destroy like the value of that game if they did that? You'd also have to figure out how they would do it with like the disc swap mechanic and everything like that, if they would just kind of program around it and design it. But let me know about a couple different Sega Saturn games you guys would like to see come over. Let me know about some Dreamcast games that you want to see come over, or even Genesis. Honestly, Sega Ages is such a large umbrella. Like, it's pretty much all Sega games. I assume Master System games, Game Gear games. I mean, seriously, all these different systems could show up under Sega Ages. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. Let me know which games you would like to see come over, and if you think it will be successful, or if you think it's going to kind of come out, maybe they're going to release like 3 or 4 games, because they keep talking about enhancements even for things like Phantasy Star to try to make it a little easier for people to play. But let me know if you think it'll come out, and if it'll kind of just sputter, it won't really get off the starting line very well, and maybe they just kind of abandon it. Sega, I think, will do well. I think Genesis and all that stuff will do well, but man, Dreamcast games, Saturn games, are you kidding me? Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.